The Baths of Caracalla are the best preserved imperial baths or thermae from imperial Rome. Let's examine this monument in detail, from its construction and decorations to its underground passageways and ultimate demise. The Thermae Antonianae, as it was known in antiquity, was built in the reign of Septimius Severus' son, Caracalla, the emperor from 211 to 217. The baths were probably constructed between 212 and 216. That's for the core building. But the surrounding precinct walls, in contrast, seem to date later, all the way to the reign of Alexander Severus at the end of the Severan dynasty in 235. So this was a long-term project, and it had its own aqueduct, the Aqua Antoniana, from the major Aqua Marcia. And we can see a portion of its passage into Rome at the so-called Arch of Drusus just inside the Aurelianic wall circuit. This is one of the most famous of all imperial thermae, large-scale imperially sanctioned baths in the city of Rome. Each one was fed by an aqueduct, and it was possible for the Baths of Caracalla to accommodate 10,000 people at a time. We see all the thermae constructed in Rome on Lanciani's map, from the Baths of Agrippa and Nero in the Campus Martius to the Baths of Titus and Trajan on the Esquiline slopes. Best preserved and the immediate precedent for the Baths of Caracalla were the Baths of Trajan, but it was already a century earlier. It was time for a new thermal contribution. The Baths of Caracalla were located on the busy Via Appia atop a previously existing residential area in the minor Aventine Hill. They were a new declaration of magnificence along Rome's great superhighway. These baths were followed by the even larger Baths of Diocletian on the Viminal and the final thermae of Rome, the Baths of Constantine on the Quirinal. Janet Delane's groundbreaking study has evaluated the well-preserved monument and not only estimated the quantities of materials needed, but also the amount of earth removed for the foundation and the manpower required based upon documentation of building and labor forces under the English Empire. Now, the core of the baths is a robust 1,000 Roman feet by 1,000 Roman feet. That's roughly 325 meters on a side. Now, based upon the previous large-scale bath of Rome, the Baths of Trajan, this one was built with an even greater ambitious scale. Delane's study of wall thicknesses, heights, columns, proportions, foundations, and decoration gives us a new appreciation of this Thermae Magnificentissimae, as it was known in antiquity. And let's talk about materials. Selce, tuff, pumice, lime, brick, timber, baskets and rope, marble, and metals, iron, lead, and bronze. Starting with the deep foundations, 150,000 cubic meters were excavated, and keeping in mind that a previously existing Antonine-era neighborhood was buried in this construction. In fact, we can see from this excavation photo that some of the houses were later excavated. And in fact, some of their Hadrianic wall paintings are now on display in the baths themselves. Who made the baths? Let's take a look at this famous Via Latina tomb fresco. All the basics are present: building materials, workers, scaffolding. We just have to blow this image up to a colossal scale. The Lane study includes an analysis of manpower, skilled and unskilled, estimate of the materials, foundation, brick, marble work, and logistics for sending the materials between 212 and 216. The foundations consisted of nearly 300,000 cubic meters of tuff and mortar and 330,000 cubic meters of landfill. For the walls that are largely intact, 210,000 cubic meters of concrete and nearly 1 million bricks for the walls. 1,530 blocks of white marble. That's 6,300 cubic meters of marble. Consider that it's 2.7 tons per cubic meter of marble. And that's including 16 columns weighing 50 tons each. Again, let's look at that famous fresco of masons. Scaffolding, builders, carpenters, the teams and associations of various experts, not slaves, were organized like an army, but we still don't exactly know how. How many workers were on the site? Delane estimates up to 9,000 people working on site, But actually, it was larger. 16,000 people were involved, specialists in marble, mosaicists, and so forth, but also the oxen drivers, the wagons used, the people that raised the food that was consumed by the workers. 5 to 6% of the city's population was involved in building Rome. And again, don't think about slaves, but mostly freed labor, organized into collegia or associations of various skilled and unskilled workers, carpenters, bricklayers, smiths, and so on. The latest restorations of the baths are in the reign of Theodoric of the early 6th century. But the use of the baths finally ended, and we find documented 6th to 8th century burials in a portion of the baths. It had become a cemetery, probably in use for the nearby Santissimi Nereus and Achilles Church on the Via Appia. Now, it wasn't until the 15th and 16th centuries that you have a renewed interest in the site and the attraction of the site for drawing out looters, as well as the Farnese family that were interested in discovering new marbles, discovering new works of art, and putting them in their collections. But by and large, the site that we have today is due to the stripping out of the site for marble, metals, and even bricks. Now let's take a tour. In this position, we're looking at an excavation along the Via Appia of Hadrianic shops in a valley, which is filled in with the construction of the Baths of Caracalla. And in the distance, we can see the shops at a lower level at the time of Caracalla. And behind it still, at a highest level, is the actual platform with the Baths of Caracalla. From this perspective, we are now above those shops, and the excavation is in the green grass of the field there in the distance. But these are the shops that lined for hundreds of meters the Via Appia. And behind on the upper terrace, again, this is all an artificially constructed terrace of great height, we can now see the standing remains of the Baths of Caracalla. We're starting with an examination of the outer precinct wall. Here, this big open space is the stadium area, and behind it are the remains of the massive series of cisterns for accommodating the use of the baths, a change of water on a daily basis. Moving past the cisterns in the stadium area, which could accommodate countless people for outdoor spectacles, we're now in the library. This is a massive structure, and we want to understand that those niches that we see there are for the cupboards for holding the propriety scrolls. So this was a great feature. And of course, it's a symmetrical bath construction. So on the other side of the precinct, you'll have yet another series of niches for the other library. So there's a Latin library and a Greek library. This massive staircase, this gives you access from the top of the minor Aventine Hill down into the bath complex of Caracalla. We can admire here the size and the scale of this precinct wall. And along it, as we pivot down that long length of the Baths of Caracalla, we'll see other niches, other buildings for accommodating other forms of entertainment in the baths. Now we're entering into the central core of the Baths of Caracalla. We'll start with the heated rooms, the solarium, the caldarium, the tepidarium. And what we have is a series of rooms with a single wall missing. Well, what's missing is a wall of glass. The glass windows are disappeared because the glass and the framework could be recycled. But we want to think about these rooms as having dry heat, utilizing solar heat, and the real standout feature is the caldarium. It's very poorly preserved, but its dome originally was 3/4 the diameter of the Pantheon, and the piers that are still standing are 33 meters high. And when we think about how impressive this would have been in antiquity, we think of the dome was probably lined with gilded bronze, according to Delane's study. We're entering in the Palestra area. This is multiple stories. We'll see some lovely late Severan colored mosaics. See some black and white mosaics that are leaning on a wall. But we can look around here and see that the walls were originally lined with marble. There are trace remains of them. Here's one of the refined details here we can see in this app space. We can see the telltale signs with all of the bullet holes where there once were metal pins holding in the marble revetment. And it really does indicate to us just how beautifully and lavishly this was once designed and decorated. Stepping into the Frigidarium space now, we have a vaulted space up to 34 meters in height originally, and this central area, 59 by 24 meters. To get a sense of this, we can actually go over to the Frigidarium that is preserved in the Baths of Diocletian, today's Santa Maria degli Angeli. Here's another view of the Frigidarium space, moving over towards the caldarium space. But this is the largest space. It's the widest space with the highest ceiling because you didn't have to heat it. And we do get a sense walking through it just how majestic it was. And we get a sense of that grand scale. And then off the left here, we can see some of the submerged sunken pools, water that was not heated. Looking through that open space towards the Natatio, as we make our way, we're pivoting over to the left towards the tepidarium and the caldarium spaces. It's just magnificent to be able to walk through and see so much of the core buildings intact at this great scale. We're walking right towards the tepidarium with the piers of the caldarium in the distance. We're now walking through the eastern palestra, and we can see some of the vaulting that curls up at the top. So there's the upper terrace. And we can see large holes, huge holes for sustaining massive amounts of once inserted blocks of marble. It's a big open space for working out, but we also know it was here that the famous statue, the Dircea group, was found, which the Farnese family eventually took to Naples, and we'll be able to admire it shortly. But right now, we're just taking a look at a much better preserved palestra. We can see more mosaic floor of the Severan period, and here we can see the remains still in situ, still intact, of the framework, the border, the frieze in marble that hasn't been robbed out. It's these sorts of elements that clues into how magnificent the baths really were in antiquity.
Baths of Caracalla, the grand Natatio. That Olympic-sized swimming pool, about 3 feet deep, accommodates countless Romans of all social classes. The greatness of the imperial baths. It's for everybody.
Now we descend into the subterranean spaces, and I think just from these images, we can really get a sense of the scale. We can get a sense of just how big the enterprise was. In this case, thinking about logistics of moving materials, in particular, the wagon loads full of wood that have to go to the underground furnaces, for example. And then the real standout feature today as a visitor, you actually have the largest preserved Mithraeum ever found in the ancient world here underneath the Baths of Caracalla. So there was a lot going on down here. It wasn't just the workings of the slaves stoking the fires. There's so much more going on here. There's life. It's a microcosm of the Roman world, you could say. Now we can take a look at the incredible statuary that comes from the Baths of Caracalla. This is the punishment of Dircea. It was used as a fountain in the palestra, and we can see here something that we were meant to walk around in antiquity. We're walking around today. This is in the Naples Museum, and it was brought by the Farnese family. So they've excavated out the great statuary of the baths, and now it's on display in Naples. And it's an awful story of punishment of Dircea, who betrayed her stepsons. We see so many colossal statues here in the Farnese collection in Naples. This is the most famous of all. It's the Hercules, the weary Hercules, with a lysipic stance. And here it is signed by Glycon the Athenian. And again, a standout feature in the Baths of Caracalla. So if you go down to Naples and you do look at the Farnese collection, you could admire so many great works of art that were unearthed in the remains of the Baths of Caracalla by the Farnese family. Another wonderful place where you can see ruins from the Baths of Caracalla is the piazza in front of Palazzo Farnese. And we have two of these wonderful fountains. They are absolutely massive in scale. Each one is carved from a solid block of granite from Egypt. They served as fountains in the Baths of Caracalla. They serve as fountains for the Farnese family in their piazza in front of their palace, still today. And from the superintendency, we have incredible renderings that give us an idea of how the setting was so magnificent for those fountains as well as the colossal statue of Hercules. Another great feature from the Baths of Caracalla is the mosaics, Alexandrian in date, that depict athletes. These are extraordinary. These are real people. Many of the figures are labeled, but you can see their own efforts, their poses, their glances, their gazes. It gives you a connection with their activities as athletes, discus throwers, boxers, wrestlers, and so on. Today, they are displayed in the Vatican museums. Thanks for watching and subscribing to our channels. New videos drop every Monday, and From the Vault lectures are available on Wednesdays. And for on-site exploration and travel, check out my Darius Aria on YouTube on Tuesdays and Fridays. See you somewhere in the Mediterranean.